My girlfriend looked around the room and said, "Every man here has a better future than you do." Nobody defended me, so I finished my drink and left alone. 10 months later, she sat speechless after learning the largest employer in her county had recently been acquired by a firm operating under my leadership. "Every man here has a better future than you do." She said it like it was obvious, like she was pointing out the weather. The room didn't erupt. It didn't gasp. It just shifted. A few people looked at me. A few people looked away. Some laughed, not loud, just enough. Reagan raised her eyebrows and took a sip of her wine like she'd just witnessed someone confirm what she already suspected. Delaney stared at the floor. Nobody said anything. Nobody said, "That's not fair." Nobody said, "Come on, Peyton." Nobody defended me. Not one person in that room. I looked at Peyton. She wasn't even watching me with cruelty. That was the part that hit hardest. She looked almost bored, like she'd made a factual observation and was waiting for the world to catch up. I picked up my drink, finished it slowly, set the glass down on the table beside me with a quiet click that I still remember. Then I walked to the door, picked up my jacket from the hook near the entryway, and stepped out into the cold air. No speech, no scene, no slammed doors, just the soft sound of a door closing behind me. I heard Summer say something as I left. I didn't turn around to hear what it was. I got into my car, sat there for a moment with my hands on the wheel, and drove home. I didn't call Peyton that night. I didn't text her. I didn't sleep much either. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and felt something moving through me that I couldn't name. Not quite anger, not quite grief. Something quieter than both. 10 months later, some of those same people would be reading a business acquisition announcement with my name listed as the executive leading the firm. The largest employer in the county. Hundreds of employees. A deal that had been covered by 3 regional publications and 1 national trade outlet. Peyton's name wasn't in any of those articles. Mine was. At the time, none of us knew that was coming. Not them. Not me. I didn't realize it then, but that moment, that quiet, unchallenged sentence delivered in a crowded living room, changed everything. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 29 when Peyton said that to me in front of everyone. We had been together for almost 3 years. I met her at a mutual friend's birthday gathering, one of those rooftop events in the summer where everyone is overdressed and pretending the wind doesn't bother them. She was standing near the railing talking to Delaney, and I remember thinking she had this quality I couldn't quite label. Confident, but not loud about it. Sharp, but she didn't lead with it. She laughed at something Delaney said and looked out at the city like she owned it a little. I introduced myself. We talked for 2 hours before I asked for her number. She made me work for it slightly, which I respected. By the second date, I knew I liked her more than I had liked anyone in a long time. By the 6th month, I thought I loved her. By the 1st year, I was certain. At that point, I was working as a mid-level project coordinator for a regional logistics consulting firm. Not glamorous. Decent salary. Solid enough work. I had also, quietly, been spending evenings building out a side business, a small operational consulting practice I was developing with Parker, my best friend since college. Parker was the kind of person who believed in slow, careful building. He didn't talk about success the way some people do, loudly, constantly, like they need the room to agree with them. He just worked. And I was trying to do the same. Peyton knew about the side work. She knew Parker. She was polite about it in a way that I told myself meant she was supportive. Looking back, I understand now what polite actually meant. Peyton worked in marketing, brand partnerships, event sponsorships, that kind of space. She was good at it. She was also constantly surrounded by people who measured themselves in titles. Senior director, VP of this, head of that. She absorbed that language the way you absorb the speech patterns of whoever you spend the most time with. The red flags were subtle in the beginning. A comment here, a comparison there. Nothing that felt like an alarm. Just small things I noticed and filed away and didn't examine closely enough. There was one conversation I kept replaying in my head later. I won't get to it yet, but it came before the party, and it mattered more than I understood at the time. The comparing started gradually. It didn't arrive all at once. It came in layers. First, it was just observations, passing comments about someone we knew who had gotten promoted, or a friend of a friend who had sold a company, or someone from her work who had just been made a partner at 32. She didn't say anything directly critical of me when she made these observations. She just made them, frequently, and always with a tone of admiration that felt like it was pointing somewhere. The dinner with Delaney and her boyfriend Mason was the first time I felt it clearly. Mason worked in commercial real estate. Nobody's version of impressive by the metrics of that room. I noticed Peyton adjusting through the night. Not in a dramatic way, just in the way you can feel someone becoming a slightly different version of themselves depending on who's standing near them. She laughed more easily around Cole. She listened more carefully to Logan. She introduced me to Brandon with a half-second hesitation before she said what I did for work. I got drinks. I made small talk. I checked in with Parker over text briefly. He had sent me something about a potential project we were working on, and I wanted to read it later. I was doing fine. Then it happened. We were standing in a loose group near the living room. Peyton, Summer, Reagan, Delaney, and a few of the men from the networking crowd. Someone had made an offhand comment about career trajectories, about where people saw themselves in 5 years. I don't even remember who started it. What I remember is Peyton's face. She looked around the room slowly. Her eyes moved from Cole to Logan to Brandon to the others. Then they landed on me. And she said it. Every man here has a better future than you do. The sentence sat in the air. Summer laughed. Reagan raised her wine glass slightly, like the statement had been a toast. Delaney looked at the floor. No one objected. Not one person. I stood there for a moment. I didn't feel the rage I might have expected. I felt something cleaner than rage. Something that felt like clarity. I picked up my drink from the table next to me. Finished it. Set the glass down. Looked at Peyton one last time. She was already turning back toward the group. Already moving on. Like I had already been categorized, filed, and forgotten. I walked to the door. Got my jacket. Stepped outside. Got in my car. Drove home. I heard later, through Delaney, weeks after, that Peyton waited for my call that night. Then waited for my text. Then assumed I was taking some time. She assumed I would come back. I never called her again. The first week after the party, I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. I felt hollow. I still loved her, or the version of her I had convinced myself existed. And that version of her took time to let go of. Parker came over on a Tuesday night, 3 days after the party. I told him what happened. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and didn't say a word until I was finished. Then he said, "Okay. Okay." I said, "Okay," he said again. So now we work. Parker was not a man who offered comfort as a primary product. He offered direction. And right then, direction was the only useful thing. We had been developing the consulting practice slowly. Operational efficiency work for mid-size regional companies. The kind of structural improvement work that doesn't photograph well for social media, but makes businesses run cleaner and produce more. It wasn't glamorous, but we believed in it. After the party, something shifted in my approach. Not desperation, not revenge-fueled hustle. Something more like an engine that had been running at 80% finally hitting full capacity. I started earlier. I worked later. I stopped spending energy on anything that didn't move the work forward. I also met Bennett around this time. Bennett was a 61-year-old semi-retired operations executive who Parker had connected me with through a mutual contact. The first time we met for coffee, I expected advice. What I got instead was interrogation. He sat across from me and asked me questions about the business for 45 minutes without sharing a single opinion. Then he said, "You're thinking small." "I'm being realistic," I said. "Those are two different things," he said. "You think they're the same. They're not." He became a mentor in the truest sense. Not encouraging, not cheerleading, but correcting. He showed me where our model had soft spots. He introduced me to Hayden, a work contact who had operational experience in the kind of mid-market acquisitions we were eventually going to need to understand. The early months were not easy. 2 clients rejected proposals we spent weeks developing. A third signed, then paused the engagement 3 weeks in. The financial pressure was real. I was working a full day at my primary job and then putting in 3 or 4 hours on the consulting work afterward. I ate too much fast food. I slept irregularly. My apartment looked like someone had given up on it. But I kept going. The opportunity that changed my future almost went to someone else. I almost missed it because I was exhausted. I almost let it pass. It was Hayden who flagged it. A regional manufacturing company, about 300 employees, family-owned for 2 generations, was quietly looking for operational restructuring help before they considered any kind of outside investment or sale. The contact was informal, nothing official. Hayden had heard it through someone who had heard it from someone else. "It might go nowhere," he said over the phone. "But the company's real, the problem's real, and they need someone who understands process without the overhead of a big firm." "When do they need a conversation?" I asked. "End of next week," he said. "You interested?" I was interested. Parker and I put together a proposal over 4 days. Bennett reviewed it twice and made us rewrite the opening entirely. "You're leading with your credentials," he said. "Lead with their problem." We rewrote it. The meeting went for 2.5 hours. They pushed back on our timeline. We adjusted. They asked about comparable experience. We were honest about our size and direct about our methodology. 3 days later, they signed. It was the largest engagement we had taken on. It was also the one that required us to actually build out the practice, hire contractors, systematize the work, formalize what had been informal. Over the following months, we delivered. Not perfectly. There were weeks where I thought we had made a critical mistake. There were conversations with Bennett where he was blunt in ways that stung. But we delivered, and the client noticed. They referred us to 2 other companies. One of those referrals led to a third. The thing about a reputation in regional business is that it moves slowly at first, and then it moves in ways you can't track. I started getting calls. Not floods of them, just enough. During this stretch, Peyton surfaced occasionally at the edges of my awareness. Mutual friends mentioned her. Delaney texted me once, carefully, to say she hoped I was doing well. I heard through someone that Peyton was dating a man named Ryan who worked in investment management, that he had the kind of career she had always admired from a distance. I didn't feel what I expected to feel when I heard that. I felt nothing particular, which told me something about where I was. Then Hayden called me on a Wednesday afternoon in late autumn. He said 4 words that I didn't fully understand yet. "Landon wants to meet." I didn't know who Landon was. Hayden told me. I paused for a long moment. "Why does Landon want to meet with us?" I asked. "Because," Hayden said, "someone showed him what you built." I had no idea that decision, agreeing to that meeting, would eventually change an entire county. Landon was the kind of person who had been operating at a level I was still learning to understand. He ran a regional investment and acquisition firm. Not a household name outside the industry, but inside it, the name meant something. He had spent 20 years identifying undervalued operational businesses in secondary markets and acquiring them or restructuring them or doing both. He wasn't flashy about it. He had an office that was clean and functional and decorated with nothing personal. He shook my hand, offered me coffee, and then spent the first 15 minutes of the meeting asking me questions about how I thought. Not what I had done, how I thought. Parker sat beside me. We answered honestly. By the end of that first meeting, Landon said, "I'm going to introduce you to a situation. It's complicated. It's large. I want your framework on it before I tell you what I actually need." Over the next several weeks, we went back and forth. Proposals, counter-proposals, a framework session that lasted 4 hours. Bennett flew in for 2 days to review the overall shape of what was developing. He sat with us in a hotel conference room and drew diagrams on a whiteboard and said, almost to himself, "This is the one. You think." Parker said, "I know," Bennett said. "You need to not get scared when it gets big." It was getting big. Landon's firm was acquiring a large regional employer, a company that had existed in that county for over 30 years. Hundreds of jobs. Institutional presence. The kind of business that shows up in local news when it changes hands. He needed an operational leadership team who understood restructuring from the inside. Not a consulting overlay. Actual embedded leadership. He was offering us a role I hadn't anticipated. Not a contract. A stake. An operational leadership position with equity tied to outcomes. I sat with that for 2 days before I answered. I thought about what Peyton had said. Not with bitterness. More like a reference point. A woman who had spent 3 years ranking futures had ranked mine last. She had looked at me in a room full of people and found me to be the least promising person in it. I thought about that. And then I thought about why she had done it. Because I understood it now, in a way I hadn't at the time. Peyton grew up watching her parents struggle. She told me that once, not as a confession, just in passing, that money had been a constant background tension in her house growing up. She had built her entire value system around visible markers of security. Not cruelty, fear. She was terrified of ending up back where she started. So she read people the way a weather instrument reads pressure, constantly, instinctively, trying to predict storms. And I didn't present like shelter. Not then. Not to her instruments. She wasn't wrong about the present tense. She was wrong about the future. I called Landon. I said yes. The deal closed on a Thursday. It went public the following Monday. A regional business journal ran the announcement first. Then a local news outlet picked it up. Then a national trade publication ran a brief. The headline was clean and factual. Regional employer acquired by investment firm. New operational leadership team announced. My name was in the second paragraph. My role was clear. The stake was not disclosed in full, but the language was not vague about what I held. I didn't post about it. I didn't call anyone from the old life. I was too tired, honestly. The deal had consumed the final 2 months in ways that had compressed time until days felt indistinct. Parker texted me that morning. "It's done. You did it." I texted back, "We did it." Bennett called, said 2 sentences. "Good work. Now do the actual work," and hung up. Hayden took Parker and me to dinner. We ate at a quiet restaurant, not a celebration venue. Just a table and food and some wine and the particular silence that settles after something large has finally finished arriving. Peyton found out on a Tuesday, 8 days after the announcement. This is what I pieced together later, from Delaney, who told me only as much as she felt right telling me. Peyton had been on her phone, scrolling through something, and she came across a shared post from someone in the regional business community. Someone who had tagged the acquisition announcement. She read it casually, the way you read things on a phone when you're not fully paying attention. Then she stopped. She read it again, and again. The name in the second paragraph. The firm. The role. The county. Her county. The employer her father had worked for. The company whose name had been background noise her entire life growing up. Delaney said Peyton sat very still for a long time. Didn't say anything. Just sat there with the phone in her hand. Reagan was with her when it happened. Reagan, who had raised her wine glass that night. Reagan said nothing either. There was nothing to say. Everything she had cataloged, measured, and ranked had been running on different terms than she understood. The man she had dismissed in front of a room full of people was now overseeing the operational future of the largest employer in her county. She tried to reach me that week. First a text, short, carefully written, the kind of message that has been revised several times before sending. "Hey, I saw the announcement. Congratulations. That's a big deal." I read it. Didn't respond. 3 days later, a longer message. Something about how she had always known I was capable. Something about how she was proud of me. I read that one too. The word always sat strangely. I remembered a room. A sentence. A silence. I put my phone down and went back to work. She called me 6 weeks after the announcement. I almost didn't answer. I'm not sure why I did. Maybe because I was finally far enough from it that I was curious rather than guarded. Maybe because some part of me wanted to hear what she would say when there was nothing left to calculate. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I said. A pause. "Can we meet somewhere?" she asked. "Just coffee." "Nothing. I just want to talk." I thought about it. "Sure," I said. 1 hour. We met at a place downtown. Neutral territory, the kind of coffee shop that has too many plants and not enough seating and always has something acoustic playing softly in the background. She looked the same. Composed. The confidence still there, but with something underneath it now that I hadn't seen before. Something that might have been uncertainty. We ordered. We sat down. She started twice before she actually started. "I've been thinking a lot," she said. About everything. About what I said that night." She paused. "About how wrong I was. I didn't rush to fill the space." She said, "I didn't see it. What you were building. I was looking at the wrong things." "You were looking at what you'd always been taught to look at," I said. She looked up. "I don't blame you for that," I said. "I understand where it came from." Something shifted on her face. She hadn't expected that. "But that doesn't change what happened," I said. "Or what it cost." "I know," she said quietly. "You said that in front of people who knew both of us," I said. "And no one said anything. Not even you, after. You didn't call to apologize. You didn't reach out for weeks." She nodded. Her jaw was tight. "I know," she said again. "I'm not angry, Peyton." She looked up again. "I was for a little while," I said. "But mostly I was just done. That night I left, I wasn't making a dramatic exit. I was just done." She held her coffee cup with both hands. "Is there any version of this?" she started, then stopped. She tried again. "Is there any way?" "No," I said. Not harshly, just clearly. She nodded slowly. The expression on her face was something I had never seen from her in 3 years. It was the look of someone who finally understood that what they were searching for had already moved on, not out of spite, but simply because it had somewhere else to be. We sat for another 20 minutes. We talked about small things. The city, her work, Parker. When we stood to leave, she said, "I really am proud of you. I know that might not mean anything now. It means you're a decent person," I said. "Who made a bad call." She laughed once, small, a little sad. We walked out. We went in opposite directions. I didn't look back. Not because I was performing anything. Just because there was nothing back there I needed anymore. The building I had been constructing for 10 months was forward. Everything I needed was forward. She spent years looking for someone with a future worth standing next to. I spent those same years building one she never saw coming.